Joining me, we've seen some fiery scenes outside the Chinese consulate in Adelaide today. Do you believe protesters' concerns are valid?
Yes, Rita, I do, and I think it's good that they were there to make themselves heard. You know, there are some Australian Uighurs there. They have direct experience of Chinese intimidation, Chinese government intimidation, and they know the suffering of Uighur citizens in mainland China. So having their voices heard was important. Having Australian farmers' voices heard because of the use by Beijing of trade as a weapon against Australia was also useful. But I think the bigger issue here is the message that the Chinese government takes out of having the South Australian Premier along. And that's a big concern, because I think it encourages the assessment in Beijing that there's a split between the federal government and state governments on China policy. And it encourages Beijing in their Tiananmen calculation, which is it doesn't matter what atrocities we commit. At the end of the day, everybody wants to get into the China market so much that they put that aside. They're the two messages that the Premier's attendance gives.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and we've seen that split between the federal and state governments, with the Victorian government signing on to the Belt and Road Initiative, despite warnings from the federal government that wasn't a good idea. How will China use that and exploit that in its dealings with Australia?
Well, I think they'll try to drive a wedge between the federal government and the federal parliament, which is pretty united on this, and state governments, because it's a simple weakness in our federal system that the state governments have no responsibilities for foreign affairs and national security. Therefore, they've got no capacity in their departments or agencies to understand those issues, and there's not a deep enough connection between those federal government agencies that have that expertise and state government apparatus. So there's a gap there, and Beijing loves to use gaps to drive wedges. So they will do that. It's up to us to lift our game on that.
Now, there's also concerns that this new Chinese consulate could potentially pose a threat to our national security. Do you believe that's, again, a legitimate concern? Could they be spying on us, or is this something that I think is overblown?
It's not at all overblown. The head of ASIO, Mike Burgess, gave his annual threat assessment just a couple of weeks ago. He said that espionage and foreign interference were now major risks to Australia, and he gave the case of defence technology classified defence technology being subject to espionage, with him having to eject foreign spies that had compromised Australian officials with that information. Now, Adelaide is a real sweet spot here. If you want to coerce and intimidate a Uighur population, the Adelaide Uighur community is a target. And if you want to get hold of defence science and technology information, there's a major facility there. And of course, the submarine and frigate programs are being built there.
That is an excellent point there. And there were members of the Uighur population there who said their families were in concentration camps. So you can well understand why they'd be out there protesting.